Gotta catch 'em all. This is the tagline and slogan for this now over 25-year-old series and is its ultimate test. To obtain each and every Pokemon, you physically have to commit yourself to a cause, and on occasions you need to have the drive and will to go through the toughest challenges, and at other times you'll simply need to walk out of your house and throw a ball at one of your neighborhood squirrels. However, try as you might, there are certain Pokemon that are just impossible to obtain in these games no matter how hard you try, and others that are just plain frustrating to bother attaining. So today I wanted to take the time to commiserate with you all and chalk down 8 of the most impossible Pokemon to obtain across the game's history. That said, I'm sure I'll miss a few, so do be sure to comment any I do miss in the comments down below, and while you're heading down that way, if you like Pokemon and don't mind me, I'd really appreciate it if you consider giving this video a like and maybe subscribe for more like it in the future. That said, let's head into this heartbreak. Number 1, Celebi in Gold, Silver, and Crystal, North American version. Pokemon's Generation 2 held one of the most important roles in the series, that being to follow up the immense success of Pokemon Red and Blue and see if the series could hold any aspect of longevity. As such, they needed to innovate, and they did exactly that by including 100 brand new Pokemon to the Pokedex for you to collect. Among these Pokemon, we of course needed legendary and mythical mods, and this generation received the Onion Fairy known as Celebi. Now, Celebi is among my personal favorite Pokemon of all time, and from the very start, I was eager as can be to catch one in my copy of Pokemon Silver. So could you imagine my utter shock and heartbreak when I found out that there was no way for Americans to receive the event where you could acquire Celebi? As a child, I remember distinctly sitting down after being told that, and I felt emptier than the streets of the world after the start of COVID, as the only way you could legally get a Celebi in America is by trade. But considering you need to trade with a Japanese player via a link cable, there is practically no way an American player would ever be able to acquire this crunchy onion without the use of Game Shark, of course. Number 2, Munchlax in Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. As far as it goes in the Generation 4 games, Munchlax is probably one of, if not the hardest non-event, non-legendary Pokemon to acquire for your Pokedex, simply because of the fact that you had to get him using the honey trees, where he's got just a 5% chance of appearing, and that's even before you find out that you only have a Munchlax in 4 out of 21 trees within the game, which are randomly chosen based on your trainer and secret ID. On top of that, you had to wait at least 6 hours for the 5% chance to find out if the tree could have a Munchlax, strictly because those honey trees were on a set timer as to when you can make encounters. And to make it even worse, you can't even manipulate so you can pull a wibbly wobbly timey-wimey trick with the DS and make the time pass artificially with the system's clock, so you just have to sit there waiting and waiting and waiting for what feels like forever, man. Nowadays, it's at least a tiny bit easier to acquire this Pokemon because you can actually go to the internet and fill in things like your trainer ID and secret ID on a website to determine the trees where Munchlax would be, but that's still so much work to have a 1 in 20 shot of seeing one of these boys spawn in the wild. Number 3, the Regi Trio without a game guide, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Now this entry is kind of cheating because I'm giving you 3 for 1 in 1 entry, but just bear with me here, right? Specifically, we're talking about the original Regi Trio of Regice, Regirock, and Registeel. Now, while I know somebody in the comments is going to say that it's not really that hard to acquire these guys, and to that I will say with the utmost certainty that they are dead wrong. Without the use of a guide, I can guarantee that a majority of people who sought out these legendaries would never have seen a single one of them. This is down to the simple fact that while the steps to find and acquire them are technically within the game, they are written entirely in Braille, which is a method of communication used by less than 1% of the world's population today. Meaning that the crux of acquiring these legendary Pokemon without the use of a guide is down to your ability to read this language, and if you can't, then you're never gonna unlock their locations on the map, plain and simply. Number 4, Feebas in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. 4, what a stellar number. The 4 Horsemen, Fantastic Four, and even the Elite Four. But you know what the worst thing to ever come in 4 is? These 4 tiles in Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Now, Feebas in many ways is just Generation 3's Magikarp as it evolves into a reasonably sought after water type that is known to be the ace of Wallace's Pokemon team in Emerald. And with it being the ace of the champion, of course, it has to be a little rare, right? The problem is, a little rare is an understatement, and Game Freak did not need to make it this hard to acquire. Listen, I totally get the want to have certain Pokemon be rare and sought after, right? But as a child, I genuinely traversed this channel for endless hours trying to acquire one only to give up. But hey ho, as a kid I bugged a buddy of mine to trade me on lunch during school, so I was all dripped out with my Milotic before long. And after that, as you can probably imagine, I never even once thought of looking for one in the wild ever again because of how agonizing it was to search for the first time. Number 5. Manaphy and Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Now we've talked about some legendaries, but I want to switch off to a mythical for this next entry, and the only one among them that is capable of producing eggs specifically, that of course being Manaphy, who was the featured Mon in the 9th Pokemon movie, Pokemon Ranger in the Temple of the Sea. This little guy was positioned heavily in promotional material for the film, and of course was a key player in the story of the movie. That said, despite it kind of being a Generation 3 movie, in the games it was technically a Generation 4 Pokemon, meaning it was only featured in the Pokedex as of Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. However, acquiring it in the mainline game is a bit less intuitive than you'd imagine, seeing as the only way to acquire it is by purchasing and beating the entirety of the spin-off game Pokemon Ranger, which is of course based on the ideas seen in that 9th Pokemon film we talked about earlier. After beating the game, you can go to the main menu and input a code in the RangerNet option, which will unlock a special mission titled Recover the Precious Egg, where you do exactly what the title says and recover a Manaphy egg. From there, you complete the mission, grab a second DS, and essentially trade it to yourself. Meaning that at the time, you needed to at least spend a minimum of an extra $60 just to tag this Pokemon down in your Pokedex. However, it would be a considerable amount more if you didn't already have a second DS or a friend willing to do the trade with you. While it is really cool to see these games kind of intertwine, it's just a headache and a chore, despite how cool it may be. Number 6. Vespiquen and Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. We're going to head back to Generation 4 for this next Pokemon, which I will say is completely attainable in-game with any version. But when I say it's a challenge to acquire Vespiquen, I mean it. First, you need to get some honey just like Munchlax and slap it on a tree. Then you need to wait at least 6 hours and hope you get a Combi, which by the way only has around a 10% chance of spawning. Then as you make the encounter and you see that stupid looking honeycomb go across the screen, you better cross your fingers and pray to God, Arceus, that it's a female. Otherwise, you're going to have to spend another 6 hours to even have another shot at getting the Queen Bee. Now, patience is definitely a virtue, but it's one I do not possess, so you can bet your bottom dollar that I never even bothered trying to get one after that first male Combi. Number 7. Spiritomb and Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Keeping on trend with the Gen 4 entries, this one in particular holds an especially painful place in my heart, as I've recently been reminded of the pain of acquiring it through my playthrough of Brilliant Diamond. Spiritomb at the initial release of Diamond and Pearl was the second Pokemon ever to receive the typing of Ghost Dark next to Sableye. Unlike the Gemite Spectre though, Spiritomb is a Pokemon with very solid stats all around, making a formidable Mon on its own. But when you think back to Generation 4 and all the types available back then, you can probably recollect there wasn't a single type that was super effective against it, which is probably the reason why the devs at Game Freak gave Cynthia one as well. However, to obtain this Mon, you have 4 steps. 1. Acquire the Odd Keystone, which can be found by following Route 208 just before you head into Hearthome City. 2. Place that bad boy on the Hollow Tower. 3. You need to find and talk to 32 people in the underground. Yes, this is a real step, and yes, it is very hard to accomplish, especially in the modern day where the underground is about as populated as one of my comment sections. And then your 4th step is, of course, to finally battle and capture the thing. Honestly, it's a chore to even think about catching it in this game, but maybe it's worth it. No, it's not. Number 8. 100% Zygarde in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Despite being a Generation 6 Pokemon, Zygarde didn't get a proper feature until Pokemon Sun and Moon in Generation 7. Unfortunately, it did have to take a bit of a backseat in the story-heavy world of Alola, but it finally got its extra 10% and 100% forms in the game. You see, scattered around every nook and cranny of Alola are Zygarde cells, and when the player finds one, it will absorb into their Zygarde cube. Taking this cube to the research center in round 16 allows enough of the cells to form into a Zygarde. 10% of the cells get a 10% form, 50 cells get the standard 50% form. However, finding all 100 cells is the only way to get the true 100% form. In-game, it starts with the same appearance and stats as the 50% form, but once it drops below half health, it will transform into an astoundingly powerful Pokemon. However, like I said, these parts are all over Alola, so good luck getting 100% Zygarde in your party anytime soon. And I think with that one, I'm gonna round off this list for today. So, which Pokemon do you think is the most frustrating to obtain among these? Out of these 8, it's gotta be Celebi, but I'm interested to know if you think I missed some that are even more difficult when composing this list. So be sure to let me know all that in the comments down below. And while you're headed down that way, I'd really appreciate it if you consider leaving a like on this video and maybe subscribe for more Poke-centric videos coming in the future. All that said, I hope you stay safe and be bold, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.